mostly how it sits with the kick drum and how they're playing it. So if the kick and the bass weren't playing in the way they were, I wouldn't be able to kind of like work with it throughout the whole track. Like off the intro, you hear it by itself before the drums cut in, but that's kind of irrelevant if it doesn't work with the bass drum and make the whole song kind of pump and move. You know, these are our beds.
Right.
It's our low
totally.
end. But usually for me, how I do that will be like a little bit of Pro Q3, trying to figure out where stuff's going. I mean, I'll show you exactly. I can bring up the session and show you a little bit later. But off the top of my head, it's going to be that, a little bit of the Little Labs Voice of God plugin, that bass resonance tool. So it's like two knobs. And if you use that on the kick and that on the bass, it really helps to separate them. Like you already kind of have to do that yourself. But when you've got them on that plugin, you can do this really easy, comfortable musical low end shaping of between the two. Again, they have to be moving together already. If that's not happening, it's kind of irrelevant. And I'm
just gonna ballpark it that the bass got boosted at like 60 and the kick was boosted at like 100 or something
like that. Yeah, it's kind of just turn it to it sounds right, and then I'll check on Pro Q because I'm a visual guy as well. There's a part of it that's that.
Yeah.
But I'll usually almost always split the bass and I'll duplicate it. I'll just make a double track and I will high pass the crap out of that double track and put a distortion pedal on it. So all the low end's gone. Like we're talking like up to 300 or 400. Like I'll roll it off and then I'll use the Massey Labs THC, which is a total harmonic corruptor, and it's a rat pedal essentially. So using that and splitting it, rolling off all the low end, and so one track is pretty much all like mids and lows, and a lot of the high end's gone. The other track's all mids and highs, and I can control the distortion because I don't want to like saturate the crap out of my low end, but I need that to be able to poke through. It's a similar technique that a lot of guys will use on like 808s and stuff. So you're not just compressing and crunching. It's just some parallel stuff. But I like to kind of duplicate the whole audio track rather than doing it as an aux for some reason. That's kind of how I just learned the technique.
Or I guess you could also do like you could do what's it called, multi-band saturation, and just kind of saturate the mid-range or whatever.
Yeah, which is an awesome technique. That's not one I've really adopted too much. And in certain range, like there's I think it's called like the VSM distortion box from a company I can't remember. I got it as a UA plugin, and it kind of gives you like a second and third harmonic thing. So that's about as kind of crazy as I go with like multi-band harmonic distortion, because I don't know why. It's just like that's not one where I've been, other than that and maybe like OTT, the OTT plugin that's ridiculous. I want to do broad brush stuff, and that's just too finite for me. Again, it works super well on some stuff, but I like to take like broad brushes and make these, try and have them super dynamic and kind of in your face sounds with it. And again, that's the part of like, is this bass too big? If I heard this song off the radio, would I judge it as having too much low end? But you're like the 30th person to justify this for me, that I made the right call in what I did and how big it is.
I've never heard anything like that. Honestly, like I was just like on the speakers in my studio. It was just like I don't think I've ever heard a bass sound so 3D and full.
You have no idea how happy that makes me.
Yeah,
like
wild.
You really don't. And I'm just
and I was shocked that it worked with the kick drum, like because it was so big. You know what I mean? Like I don't know. Sorry.
No. Thank you.
Sick, dude.
The low end of it pushes really well, and I'm gonna probably do a breakdown of how I did that at some point, just like a small tip time video or something like I do, just because I've had a bunch of people ask me about it, and I need to be able to recall it faster at this point, or else I just my way through the conversation. But a lot of it is like getting the right movement of the stuff first, shaping between the two, and just making sure there's room for it. It's a really classic technique. Nothing about that is crazy or new. It's just like, how do we distill that for this pop track that I've got my hands on, this pop R&B thing that I need to make sound massive without doing 808s, because that wasn't the thing I really wanted to approach on this one in terms of making it pop.
No, you got like a new sound, I think, out of it.
Ooh, that's rare.
Yeah. Well, and the vocals also sounded amazing. I guess it didn't sound like you were doing anything crazy with the techniques. It just sounded like a great vocalist sounding great in a microphone.
Yeah, we probably retracked that. We retracked that maybe like 3 or 4 times total, because I wanted to her performance and the way it was hitting just wasn't quite right. And like we know, her and I know now that like what we did on it's absolutely necessary. Because we could sit back and think critically, hey, is this hitting us right? Is this performance good? And we ended up kind of just nailing it. I've got a very similar setup the way I've got a lot of my vocalists when they come into the room, at least through my processing and stuff, because it just helps you kind of get to the performance part quicker rather than trying to mess around too much with it.
Right.
Batista's just got such a full and massive sounding voice that I wasn't really trying to correct too much stuff. I was just able to like, enhance her best parts, use like a lot of the pop tricks of like little bits of compression in stages rather than a whole bunch of compression in one stage, and like all of those little things. And then tons and tons of volume riding. Like I want to say probably like 60-70% of my mix in that is just volume rides, is making sure those things come in right. And it's just, and going through and finessing it sometimes on like just like a one fader kind of thing. Sometimes just literally drawing in kind of what I need to hear with it, which I've gotten pretty fast on for Pro Tools at least. And awesome. and that really allows the parts to hit properly the way the ear wants to hear. Like that's probably one of the only mixes I've ever done where I wouldn't change a thing on it right now. And I'm pretty proud to have one song I've got released that I wouldn't touch.
Yeah, it's hard not to be a perfectionist with when it comes to this stuff. Are you like not so into, I guess, a lot of compression? Are you into like low levels of compression? Is that your vibe?
I'm into tons of compression, depending on what's needed. Like I don't want to squish the life out of it, but there's borrowing from tons of different spots. There's some guys that hate compression and never use any of it because they think it's like the devil. And then there's guys that use it as this big musical tool. So for me, I commit all of my stuff on the way in. Like my vocal chain will be like, for her, it was a Lawson 47 clone that we had in the studio. Sonic Farm Creamer Pre, which is like a tube preamp, will go into the Distressor. I've got one here. Love the Distressor. Favorite comp easily. And then it'll hit a Pultec, just like simple Pultec stuff, just pushing and shaping where it needs to. Little de-esser, and then an LA2A on the end. And that's like committing. So it's not, I don't have.
You're going in with the sound. That's it.
I'm going in with the sound. And but you have to, I've definitely screwed that up. I've had the wrong sound for people, but I've got it dialed now where I'm like pretty consistently, I can change it to where it needs to be. If it's not an LA2A on the end, it's going to be like the CL1B plugin. So it'll be like half hardware, half software stuff, committing to disc. Printing reverb at the same time. Like I'll have an aux channel going on my Apollo. Yeah, it's just, you just make a lot of groups and then you can get rid of it once you do tuning. But for giving the vocalist back the exact same thing they heard on the Apollo, I'll have like, the EMT 140 reverb plugin or like a chamber or something. And that's just printing to a stereo aux track with all of our takes. So it gets a little busy when we're stacking stuff heavy, but it allows you to kind of have that instant playback without having another bit of latency or another plugin running or another aux channel. It's just there. You can get rid of it when you start actually doing your mixing and you know what your settings are. But it helps to keep the inspiration kind of going for them. So it's, when a vocalist walks in front of the mic and you've got it kind of like 95% right off the top and they go like, oh my God, what? That's me? And I'm like, that's the shit I live for. Like, okay, everything else now is probably going to be really easy because they sound super inspirational to themselves in the headphones. And that's terrific. Well, so it's hard. It doesn't always pay off exactly the way I want to, but when you're doing little bits of stuff along the line, it's kind of hard to screw it up. It's only doing a little bit.
That's a great takeaway for the audience, is just to get, if you can get the artist inspired instantly, you're done. Like you're all set.
Oh, that's so much of my job. I mean, even the Vibe Cave and like the way I run the studio and stuff and having them right behind me is like to make sure we've got the inspiring things. I've got, on my way in, I've got not a crochet, it's a needlepoint thing one of my artists made, and it's a unicorn that says "Fear is the cock blocker of dreams," and that's like and that's the first thing you see when you walk in through the door. And some people are like, "What the hell is that?" And I'm like, "It is what you need it to be, man." I also have like a small brass Jesus statue that I've got hanging out off to the side, and that's like some other people's inspiration. That's what they love and that's what they need. And then other people still, I'll just distract them a bit and get them inspired one time from their headphones and the stuff we're doing. But I have a Mr. T air freshener hanging off the pop filter. And it's distracting, and it opens their brain up to actually being able to do that creation thing rather than like being stuck in like, oh, now I have to perform. And,
right.
You know, when I've got them out of their head like that, that is my first part of my job. My anxiety for a session kind of goes, especially if it's a new artist, kind of goes away because I've got anxiety every time, making sure I can get this right for the person, and I can do the job that they need me to do for their art. So when I can get them in that zone, then it's just like, oh, I got to make them sound good? No problem. I know how to do that. I can make them think they sound amazing. That's a way harder job. And when you're there, then it's just like going through the motions of getting the song done. And you're like, cool, doubles, triples, cool. Next thing, chorus, let's figure out how we need to approach it. Some people have to sing it all the way through in comp. Some people have to do it section by section. Other people, it's all different. So... But once they're out of their head, you can go from there.
Then it's all gravy, you know?
Oh, yeah.
Are you a perfectionist?
At times. There's definitely a spot where
I can't tell.
Yeah. It's knowing when to say this doesn't matter at the right times. Like, because you can a forest for the trees. You can lose the point of what you're trying to do. But it's important to know that you need to make the person do it over and over and over again to get it right. Part of it is if they're open to you being a perfectionist, because sometimes they want to have it done and they love how something feels and they don't give a shit about hearing how you're going to pitch correct the second verse stuff on the doubles because of some reason or something. They just want to hear like the emotional impact of it and how something comes across. So if it's, I'll usually try and just say, like, you know, humor me. Hey, let's try this thing. Humor me for a bit. We need to try to get this a little bit better. Or I'll know that I've got one thing that's just standing out as not quite right for the feel. Because it's always about the feel and the emotion of it. I guess I'm a perfectionist insofar as if I stop feeling what we're supposed to, if I start getting that emotion lost, whatever the emotion is, then there's something that needs to change. But I've definitely ignored, like, jazzy, quote unquote, jazzy vocal tuning on someone. Whereas like a total pop mind would say like, man, why didn't you get tighter on that? I'm like, I don't know. It sounds great to my ear. Who the hell cares? It's giving me my emotion. It's giving me my end result, which is this feeling. And if that's my ultimate, what good is it to be a perfectionist on other things? Like, what is the perfection supposed to be? Timing, tuning. You think it's perfect. The chorus hits perfectly. Like, it's just kind of dependent. I wish I had a bit more of a cut and dry.
I would say you're not a perfectionist.
Yeah, I'm not a perfectionist.
I feel like you're real, and you have like a real take on what's actually happening in the room.
Yeah, I mean, I want to say I want to be a perfectionist.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm a perfectionist, and I think it's been like my biggest weakness as a producer, engineer guy, because I think being a perfectionist just keeps you in your head more than doing, and doesn't actually help.
Yeah, there is an art to letting go. Absolutely an art to letting go of something and knowing when to do it, because like even as you as a producer, if you're talking about a client, like, you know that to give your next person, your next client, the time they deserve means you have to free up your brain power for what's going on. So, you know, you don't want to put out garbage. You have to know when you need to do the job and need to do the work. But it just comes down to analyzing what we're approaching, and doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. What is perfection in that instance? And for me, it's perfect when the emotion's hitting right and things feel the way they should be. Sometimes I make mistakes, and then other people will be like, hey, you didn't really notice that there's this flub and this thing in the bass line here. And I'm like, I was so stoked on all the emotion and the feeling of it, I kind of missed that thing. You're right, I need to change that. But it's just being aware to what really
happens
matters.
To everyone. So tell me a bit about your approach to mixing, your philosophy. Like, I don't know, anything you might have to say that might be interesting about the way you mix.
Try and mix fearlessly. like be totally stoked that when someone's approaching you to do this job, they're doing it for the reason. If you're the guy that is a perfectionist, they know you're going to make things just sealed and perfect. Man, that's your thing, and know that someone's approaching it for you. If others are coming to you because you're doing really engaging, interesting stuff, and they love